our national president, and we are very, very excited. So I'm going to do a quick intro, then I'll turn it over to you, Ms. Turner, and let you take it away. But I just want to remind you, everyone, that we claim Dr. Turner as a Omaha leaguer. I don't know if she claims us, but we're going to take it and run away. And Dr. Turner was elected this year to the League of Women Voters US as their president. She's done a lot of service for the league and was first voted onto the national board in 2016, where she served in multiple roles, for including finance, governance, and chaired the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee. She's really focused on changing the culture of the league, and that's one of the reasons we're really excited to have her here today. She is an Iowan, but again, we're claiming Nebraska for her. And so we're happy to have her. And I'll let you kind of get started, Dr. Turner, and we will have questions at the end, or you can type them in the chat. All right, Dr. Turner, thank you so much for being with us today. Thank you to everyone who's here. Dr. Turner,
you have to unmute yourself, Dr. Turner. Perfect. There you go.
You would think by now I'd figured out the mute button, but it is very hard. So first of all, it's great to be here. And, I consider myself a Midwesterner, but very specifically either a Nebraskan or an Iowan. Those are the two that I claim, because some of you may not know that actually when I started my medical career after finishing my training, my very first job as a physician out of training was at University of Nebraska Medical Center. So yeah, so I've kind of come like full circle, as my kids say. So first of all, I'd just like to thank you for letting me be here. And I do have a PowerPoint, but if we can't, I don't know how to share it. So if it doesn't share, that's fine, because a lot of times I can talk without it, okay? But before I even go there, I would like to just tell you a little bit about me, because it's, it's kind of interesting that, how did I get here from there, wherever there was, So I was actually born in a small town in northern Iowa. For you guys that don't know this or haven't heard this story, my hometown is Mason City. And Mason City, for some of us with grayer hair, know that that was actually the hometown of Meredith Willson and the Music Man. So River City and the Music Man is Mason City, Iowa. And I developed a lot of my interest in basically community activity and civic activity from my mother. My mother was a very dedicated community person. We grew up, with not a lot, like a lot of us in those times, but she was always concerned about her fellow Massachusettsians, and also about her children and everybody else's children. So she basically was a mother to multiple children, and many of you have grown up in families like that, as was my father. And because of that, I can remember as a little kid trailing behind her as we would be going door knocking and dropping literature. When I was too young to even read the literature I was dropping, okay? But, it gave me this feeling of this was an important thing to do. And so I got my start there, and I say I'm lucky. And, the people kind of look at you sometimes, and I said, as some other members here today can attest to, that sometimes when you're thinking about the Midwest, and I'm sure Candida, and do I say that right? I'm sorry if I mispronounce it wrong.
Candid or Candide.
Okay. Yeah. Think about it. A lot of times when they think about the Midwest, people don't see the Midwest as a area that has lots of people of color, or has people of color, maybe not in large numbers, but in numbers that are very relevant, and that people of color, and particularly African Americans, that are doing a lot of great things within their states and within their communities. And my mother actually was elected to the Planning and Zoning Committee in Mason City, Iowa. Mason City, Iowa was about 28,000 all of my life. We had about 300 African American folks. And planning and zoning in small town Iowa is like the committee to be on. you know, they have the power and they have the say. And she was elected to that committee when I was still in high school. And that really, you know, even furthered my interest in doing things that were civically, you know, addressed. And she talked to me about what that meant and how she helped people who of lesser means, and that because of being on that committee, she could fight for things that needed to be done in the community that were socially just. And so because of that, I think that that's how I really got my start. And from there, then I did a lot of things in school, like all of us did, you know, it was in every activity you could conceive of. And then went to, elected to go to Iowa State. So you're going, okay, so why'd you go to Iowa State? Well, my brother, older brother went to Iowa State. And, you know, I was kind of where Clamps goes, I go too. And so but I really loved that school. It was a school that worked for me. You know, it was a land grant college. And even though I was in pre-med, it was a good place to do really good science. And it was a place where I learned to grow on my own. And it wasn't easy times all the time. You know, I can remember my first year as I was there. I had issues around race and that on campus. And but one of the most interesting things that I learned, and which to this day I hate it when I hear us talking about class of people, middle class, lower class, upper class. I really think we should get rid of that discussion in our language. Because one of the first things I had to do at Iowa State was I had to sit on it was in a big, you know, one of those big lecture rooms, and you're sitting there and you're filling out kind of a demographic thing. And it had on there what level of income that your family made, you know. And so I was checking the box, or probably at that time, I don't remember if we checked boxes or colored circles or wrote words, I can't remember. But when I did that and I looked at it, and what it said was that looking at the income of my family, or my father and mother together, it put me in the lower class. And that really struck me really hard at that time, because, you know, I'd grown up in a community where sure there were the haves and the have-nots and that, but we were a small enough community where we didn't think a lot about class divisions, believe it or not. And that really brought me up short. And I thought, this is a very bad way to tell people or tell students or tell children who they are. So every time I hear us, you know, lump somebody into a class, I think about that. And I think it'd be a really great thing if that's something that we could do away with in our thoughts of how we are in America. So, but anyway, I went from Iowa State, I went to the University of Iowa, did medical school. I did my training in gynecologic oncology in Texas, and that was a culture shock in those days. It was in Houston, which was the big city, but it was one of those cities that was very, very, very divided. And I don't know the Houston in that time, and it may, in some ways it still is, but probably not to the extent it was then, but you pretty much didn't cross barriers. You know, you did what you did in your own community. When I was in the hospital, I took care of all kinds of patients. My first patient was from Brazil, actually. But once you walked out of the hospital, you did not socialize with the folks that you worked with in the hospital. So, you know, so that was kind of eye-opening to me too. So I began to really see like what's our country really like and what things we're up against. And from then on, so since that time, I've continued to be engaged in work around, justice and equality and equity. And even though I spent 30 plus years practicing gynecologic oncology, because that was where my heart was, and I loved my patients and I loved that specialty, that throughout the places that I've been, and I practiced in Iowa City and Davenport and Medical College of Wisconsin, and as I told you, UNMC, and each place, and I went home and practiced in Mason City for a while, and I ended up, my last place was in Des Moines before I came here. And each of those places, it was a little bit different, but my eyes became open wider and wider to the issues and concerns that we have in this country. So when I was in Des Moines, one of my good friends said to me, hey, you want to go to a meeting with me? And I said, okay, sure. Whatever Karen said, I'd do. And so she says, I think you'd like this group. She goes, this is a League of Women Voters group. and we were going to a meeting. I can't remember if it was on trafficking at that time or civil discourse in the legislature, and I can't remember which topic it was that exact meeting. But I went, I enjoyed it. I met a lot of people I enjoyed. I was really excited actually. And I went home, got out computer, and I went to it was the old website for the league. And that's the days when along one column, they just listed all the things that the league was engaged in, or just a list of topics. This is what we believe in, kind of. And I read down the list of topics and I said, this is the organization for me. I finally found out where I belong. And that was over 10 years ago, 12 years ago, maybe now, I can't even remember. But since that time, I've been in the league and, as we've said, and it's been very exciting and very fulfilling. And now with what's happening in the league and where we're going, and we have this opportunity to really make some major changes in our country and in how people engage with each other, I think it's very exciting times for the league. And I am very honored to actually serve as the national president of the league at this point. And so once again, I say thank you for having me and letting me share my personal journey to where we are today, still in the Midwest, which is still the best part of the country, although I'm not really happy with the snow we had today. Not one of my favorites. But anyway, so now I would like to kind of transition here to talk about a few things. And you guys sent some questions to me that you kind of wanted to discuss. And I think they're very valid questions. And I'd like to share my thoughts with you about them. And, if you have comments or want to say something as I'm chit-chatting here, really, really, truly feel free. So one of the first questions you asked was, in a tense election season, what words of encouragement do I have as to remaining nonpartisan, which is difficult in this time, or appearing nonpartisan, but still political. And so the way we look at it, what we do is we have to really play to our strength. And that's for encourage a pro-vote message. Your voice is more important than ever before, and there are options for you to participate in elections safely this way. It's interesting today, I heard a comment in a show I was listening to that if you ask someone to vote personally, they are 22 times more likely to vote than if they get a text or if they get a anonymous call on that. So that way of league members going out and asking people to vote, even if it's like in a Zoom setting like this, but whatever way that we reach people and ask them to vote, they're more likely to vote. And okay, and we have to remember too, when people push back at us, voting is nonpartisan. Having a free, fair, and accurate election is a nonpartisan activity. It is not partisan. And I think that's a message we have to continue to push over and over again, that voting is nonpartisan. And finally, the Link's mission is to empower voters and defend democracy. And our work to get out the vote this election season is part of our mission, just as it has been for the past 100 years. So this is not new. This is what we do, and we should stand for it. We should be proud of it, and we should not worry about those who are trying to make voting partisan. We just have to stand on our, stand for what we believe in and what we know, because voting is democratic, little d. It is not partisan. The voters should not expect all elections to be called or announced on election day. I think your question was, so what's going to happen in the near future as things start to wind down? What should we be concerned about? And we have to remember to tell people that, remember, we have to get voters to not expect to get all election results on election day. More and more we're going to be looking at elections as election season in our country. And that's the way the league needs to start talking about elections and dealing with elections as election season, not as specifically election day. And we have to get people to understand there will be a delayed result because of the increased number of mailed ballots. And this means the system is working as it should to to actually ensure the integrity of our election process. So if people get anxious, does that mean that something bad is going on? No, it means that they're counting carefully, and they're counting correctly. And that's why it's delayed. I think if you look back in history, they talk about voting in the early years of the United States and how you wouldn't know the results of a presidential election for weeks and weeks, because when they were carrying ballots across the country on Pony Express and various or in stagecoaches and that, I mean, there were many elections that were significantly delayed. And that was just the way people thought of it. So we have to start thinking about that a little bit more too. And we have to understand that.
Turner,
Mhm.
there might be something laying on your microphone. Is
Oh,
that?
yeah, okay. That better?
Thank you. Yes.
Yeah, sorry about that. Yeah. So anyway, so we have to get our voters to understand too that these delays will happen, and that's okay. Now, because there is this surge in mail-in ballots, it's going to require extra time. You understand that, but does your family understand that? Do your best friends understand that? Do new voters understand that? Because they've been geared up to think that, oh, this is all we vote and then we get the response. So that is going to be a big message that the league has to get out to folks, that they have to understand we're not going to get an immediate response. And also, it is also essential for everybody to understand that we want every vote to be counted. And that's one of our really key messages. And with absentee ballots and mail-in ballots, the differences, I won't even go there on that piece, okay? But that we really have to truly understand that in order for every vote to be counted, it's going to take some time. And just remind people, particularly all the people who voted, we've seen the voter outturn so far. It's been so exciting. But if each of them understands that it's going to take time to count their vote, then they will. I think people will understand it. I think maybe for the league, the most difficult thing that we're going to have to look at carefully is what basically our media sources are doing. Trying to make sure that our local stations aren't calling races too soon or making predictions. And there's been a lot of talk at the national level with some of the national media outlets to really encourage them not to do that like they have done in the past. And, if we have influence with local media in that, them getting out the message too that it's going to be delayed is going to be really, really critical. And so then we want to talk about what work we need to do in these last days before the vote as the election comes up. And we need to continue to inform voters and give them the information that they need, because there are still people who are going to be voting on voting day, and people are going to be voting, right up till right before voting day. And so we need to not let up on keeping our information out there, not let out on getting them to vote for one none, and showing that then the information is there. And we really have to work on countering any mis or disinformation, so that anything you hear that's wrong, we have to correct it. And it's going to lie on the league's responsibility a lot to make sure that doesn't happen. And when emotions are charged and people are tired, we do not want to get caught off guard and overreact to messages. Okay. So if somebody says something that's a message that doesn't seem right, we want to keep our cool and, explain the right and the wrong or the misinformation without getting into heated arguments. And needs to say, leaguers don't tend to do that necessarily. Well, maybe some of us do on occasion. Okay. But it's going to be a time where we're going to have to be sometimes in many places, be the cool heads. And we also have to be very careful about reacting to and passing on misinformation, because what happens a lot of times if you get disinformation or misinformation, what people will do is they will say, did you hear, even though you are trying to make a point that is not correct, by actually either tweeting it or emailing it or bringing attention to it in a way, it elevates it. and it becomes less misinformation or disinformation because people have heard it, so they think it's true. So you have to be very careful about passing on information or posting something that is not true, even though you're trying to deny it, okay? Voter intimidation is still a concern, and we have to make sure voters have the right, know they have the right to cast their ballot. And very interestingly, on October 29th, you can find it on the league site. We are actually hosting a de-escalation training, and you can register for that online at lwvus.org. And it was so popular that they're going to run 2 sessions of it. And I think it's going to be really beneficial. Our new organizer, Alma, is going to be hosting it with some of our other organizers from the staff, and it's going to be very enlightful. And I think it's really good for us just to know anyway, even if it weren't the situation we're worried about voter intimidation, but it helps us talk to others about how they can resist or not engage. As you probably know, I work at Planned Parenthood, and we have one slogan that everybody follows every day, and that's don't engage, don't engage, don't engage. Okay. And that's really a critical part of being safe and avoiding some voter intimidation that might happen around the polls. And the other thing is that we should make sure everybody has this number, 1-866 our vote. 1-866 our vote, as many of you may know, is the election protection hotline. And we are a major part of the election protection hotline. And you may be here in Nebraska too. But we should make sure all voters have that number, because if they run into concerns, they can call that. Anytime. It's going to be manned by thousands and thousands and thousands of volunteers on election day. And so if they have that number, they have that number to call. Okay. And then a special league update is actually coming out today, if you'll look in your mailboxes and that, and it's going to have a lot of the messaging and a lot of the tools that you can use for pre-election for the upcoming days and that. But we want to go, the question was asked, so what do we do beyond election day? Well, we have to remember that election messaging doesn't end on election day. First of all, there are elections that are held across the country and across our state all the time. And I'm sure the local league leadership, your local league leadership, will have a public message to send out on social media to the press via email to your supporters or to your website for the day or days after elections that will contain information that may be important or messages that are important, and just reminding folks again to take time and not worry and know that their votes are being counted, but also to talk about the success of the elections. And we're not talking about the success in who won, but we're already having a successful election this year because of just the voter turnout that we have seen. I mean, it is astronomical. And I can tell you, as you probably know, because you've all been probably working your fingers to the bone on this, but leagues across the country have been so engaged in the get out the vote effort. And it's going to be a historic turnout. Everybody predicts it will. And I'm very excited about that. So we're also going to be issuing some guidance about state and local advocacy priorities around the campaign for making democracy work and people-powered fair maps, because that's going to be our next big fight, redistricting in our country. And so once election day passes, we're not going to let up. We're going to be continuing to work very aggressively with our people-powered fair maps, and there's going to be a lot of messaging and ways to engage. And then don't forget about the legislative efforts. And you guys are I know Nebraska is very active on the legislative front, because sometimes after a big election like this, we get a little burnout and we want to take a rest. But our legislative sessions are going to be opening up very shortly in January for most places. And there are a lot of big things that are going to be on the legislative agenda. And we're going to have to be very active in advocating for those things. And still keeping in mind, obviously, that we're going to be dealing with COVID-19, and we just have to face, we're going to be dealing with COVID-19 well into 2021, if not into, I've heard some predictions that are a little offsetting that we will still be doing masking and social distancing, maybe even into 2022. And whatever it takes to save people's lives and whatever it takes to beat this pandemic is worth that, it's worth those things that we have to put up with. But it makes it a struggle for us. But we already know it's amazing what we can do through the media, through social media, and actually through environments like this that we didn't think we could do. Think about a year ago, we weren't thinking about doing these kind of meetings or doing this at all. It's amazing how the league has pivoted and done really, really well. So those were, I think, the big questions that you guys, you folks had asked me. And so, first of all, any comments about, I would like to let you know this too, that in case, there's still a lot of concern about what is happening with voter suppression and voter intimidation. It's what's going to happen around the polls in the country as we move through the rest of the voting season. And just so you know, and I don't know if many of you know that the league has actually been on the National Emergency Election Task Force. This is a huge task force that has members from all the major voting organizations in the country. It has military on it. It has elected officials on it. You name it. It has university officials on it. And Virginia Case, our CEO, sits on this committee, and they've been working through a lot of scenarios, preparing for any possibility around the election. And the league itself at the national level has had an election task force that we've been working with several members from around different states. And some of the messaging that you're going to see coming out and you've seen has come from the work of this election task force, which has been working since July of this year to make sure we are ready to go on any issues that may arise. So I thought that it was really important for you all to know about. So before I go on to anything else, do you have any questions about those things at all? About the, election and about any concerns that you have? And one of the real important things for you to do as a state, and I expect that you have already, is that you have a staff member from the League of Women Voters US that's assigned to Nebraska as your election day staff and the few days around there. And they will be your contact at the national level. But also we're encouraging everybody to make sure each state has its own, basically hierarchy of if something happens, who do you call? Who are we going to go to? Who are our go-to persons? And then who is going to, contact, the election protection agency, or who's going to contact the national or whatever, so we know what's going on. It's going to be really critical to have those in place. And I'm sure you're, and I think, I can't remember who is for Nebraska. It's Miss Elizabeth Hernandez, maybe. I can't remember right offhand. I apologize.
It's Stephanie. It's Stephanie Hernandez.
Stephanie, that's right. Okay. Yeah. And I'm sure she's already reached out to you but that's going to be really critical, because for the National League, in order to have information, obviously, we're not going to be all around the country figuring these things out. So we're going to be relying on states and your organization to let us know, your organized folks to let us know what's going on, so we can respond if we need to help or to find services for you. Okay.
Mhm.
I have one question here, Dr. Turner. Someone says, or Catherine Moore says, what are your views on poll watching? Are there positive ways to volunteer to be a poll watcher to help ensure against intimidation and suppression?
Okay, so we're taught, it's very interesting. In this election season, you may have noticed that the concept of a poll watcher has gotten distorted. Okay, So it is really important, and particularly to have official poll watchers. That means people who've gone through the training, have been certified to be poll watchers, who are actually in the polling sites and doing the poll watching. And generally speaking, they come from the parties, as you know, because the parties want someone in there to see, have their people voted, and then they can call the, they have call Mary Jo and say she hasn't come in to vote yet, yada, yada, yada. Okay. Poll watchers, just in general, people are not allowed to actually be quote unquote official poll watchers unless their district or their jurisdiction has certified them to do so. So a lot of times what we're talking about is not poll watchers as opposed to, there was a term somebody came up with, basically election day, volunteer.
Volunteers.
Yes.
Election protection volunteers is what
Yeah,
Civic
election
Craft is calling it.
Yes, right. And those are folks who are just there to, within the rules, because you can only stand if you're not there to vote. You can't mingle with the folks who are there to vote within a certain distance from most polling places. Every state has their own specific rules, and each and every one of us should know those, particularly if we're going to go vote that day and if we're going to be helping folks. But so our biggest concern at the league, at the national level, is that we don't want anybody to be injured. We don't want anybody to be hurt. We don't want anybody to be attacked. Okay. So the ideal, if you're going to, if you're going to maybe take friends there, or you're going to help friends, you're going to watch from a distance, that's not wrong, particularly if you're just trying to make sure the lines are going smoother, that if you're going to be at a safe place where you're just seeing, if you're going to see that the lines are getting long, or that people seem to be turned away and you're concerned and you want to call the league, or you want to report that to election protection, that's one thing. But you should not be there to engage with the voters in any way that either obstructs them or encourages them, because they're there to vote on their own. And that's really, really critical. And we certainly do not want league members out there, basically confronting other groups that may be intimidating voters and getting injured. We have really concerns about that, particularly in some parts of the country. So overall, we say if you're going to be a official poll watcher, we would love everybody that can, where they need them to be official poll watcher. If you're going to be a election protection watcher, that's a different story. And I suggest really strongly, if you're thinking about that, that you really do need to take the training, listen to what Alma and the organizers are saying about what they should do and what you shouldn't do, and where you should be and where you shouldn't be. Because we're not encouraging people to be confrontational.
Could I add something about, this is Linda Duckworth. I took training about 2 weeks ago with Civic Nebraska. So Civic Nebraska gives a really excellent training for, I think it's observer training, but I'm not sure exactly what what our title is called. I actually took the training, and I don't think I'm going to volunteer to be there in person because of, risk factors with COVID and so on. But that is an option. And it's really good training. I think it's good to have. There are other ways to help too, if you don't feel like you can be at a polling place in person. And what else did I want to say? That there is a little bit of there could be a little bit of engagement with voters. That's mostly if it's obvious they're having a problem with getting there, with getting information, or for instance, if they're at the wrong polling place, that sort of thing. So then, but you'd have to, get those specifics with that training.
Okay, that's great to know. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, you're fine. Absolutely. I wanted to add some of the concerns that we're hearing about potential, I don't know, hubbubs maybe aren't specific to our areas, and so let's be safe and of course have that information, but also let's I don't know, I think we can engage in this positively. I'll be working the polls, and I think you know it, if you're there to observe, if you talk to the poll workers and let them know that you're just there, you're not trying to do anything or anything, it makes it a little bit easier for them to, like, I know I've sent people to an observer because I knew that observer spoke Spanish and we didn't. So like it can be a team effort if everyone is there, like um, with a positive attitude. And I think we can focus on that piece, and hopefully we won't have any of the negativity, even though it's nice to be prepared for that too.
Yeah, and I think and actually you may be able to enlighten me a little bit on this, that there's not a major concern about there being significant, unrest here in Nebraska, and I may be wrong about that, unlike what they're, anticipating maybe in places like Wisconsin or Portland or areas like that, where, and even those may not be as concerned first. You may have noticed that in Minnesota, there was a plan for some significant engagement, and the Attorney General got involved, and the group that was going to be doing their poll observing with their weapons of that has agreed to stand down and stay out of the state until after Election Day. So, some of the folks at higher levels are already squashing some of these concerns in the areas that might be more, confrontational. So, because there are a few around the country where it may be more confrontational. So, okay.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. We have another question from Mary Lee Moulton. She asks, can you talk about some of the recent legal cases that the league has been involved with, and do you think we will be parties to lawsuits to count every vote?
Yes and yes. So we have, since the first part of summer, have been involved in over 50 legal cases, and they have ranged from things like, one of the biggest ones we've done in several states were, the ideal that giving people the opportunity to cure their vote. Because believe it or not, there were many states where not only if your ballot was thrown out, you were not notified, but not only were you not notified, you were not allowed to correct your ballot, say for something like maybe you forgot to sign your envelope, or maybe your signature didn't look like the signature that you had when you signed your driver's license, or whatever, 10, 15 years ago, or whatever it may be. Your official signature may not look like your signature of today. And so we've won several of those cases. We've lost a few cases. Our other really big cases have been around making sure that ballots are counted. And we are really excited about the fact that just within the last couple of days, we won the case in Pennsylvania, where so the votes are now going to be allowed to be actually voted, even if they are, not only are they going to be voted up until I believe it's 3 days or so after, but if they arrive after Election Day, because the delays due to mail, they are going to be allowed to be voted. And that was a huge win, particularly in the state of Pennsylvania, where they've been conceiving all kinds of things to block the vote. So we plan that we are prepared to engage with any legitimate litigation around disenfranchising votes after Election Day. And our team, our legal team, and the people who we partner with are prepared, and we're ready to do that. So there will probably be a flurry of cases that may come up after Election Day. Now, whether all of them will be taken up, the key that everybody forgets is that in order for the case to be brought, the court has to also agree to hear it. So, if it's truly a frivolous case, we should hope that it will be thrown out. And with some of the wins that we've had recently, we've been heartened a little bit that, things may be better than we thought. We're not sure what that means going to the future, depending on, you know, how many new judges or whatever. But right now, we've had 50 some cases. We've won 31. And we still have some that we've lost. I don't know. I think it's somewhere around 10 or so. And we've got some that are still pending. So we've had some really good runs. So we're excited about that. But we're worried about the future, quite honestly. But, you know, it is what it is, and we'll continue to fight. And we are very interested if, for example, Nebraska decided that you needed to bring a case, you know, to litigate after election day for whatever reason. Obviously, if it's a federal case, it has to be, you know, you have to fill out the federal request at the National League level, and our attorneys will look it over and determine if it's, you know, if we feel it's a case the league should be engaged with. If it's a state case, you don't have to have it approved necessarily through the National League, but we'd like to hear about those cases because a lot of times our attorneys have a lot of information that they can help with. So
We have another question, and thank you for that great answer. Someone asks, is something being done about the people who were erroneously told in Nebraska that they could not vote? Do you have any knowledge on that?
I'm afraid I do not. Can you give me a little more information of what you're talking about? I guess I'm a little bit unclued on that one.
I can jump in. Our election commission sent out notifications, and I can't tell you to how many people that they were not eligible to vote, or that they had filled out their registration incorrectly and therefore were ineligible to vote. And turns out that information they sent was wrong. Janice, I'm arguing that the ACLU, I think they have this on their radar.
Okay,
I'm trying.
I know that it's
Yeah.
it's a concern and it's been recognized, and I just was hoping that it would be corrected before the election so that those people could vote, because there was a significant number of people.
Yeah, so they said, I'm looking at the ACLU website now, and they have confirmed that 51 of the records have been corrected. So yeah, so somebody said in the comments it has something to do with felons, but what happened is that people were told they were convicted of a felony and they weren't, and then they were disqualified.
Okay. Okay.
So yeah, it's like just a lot. There were several errors, and they are working.
Okay, so they are having the opportunity to cure their votes then, or to is the registration piece what's the concern? I guess you're saying. Yeah, so
I would also add that not all counties do it, but the Douglas County Election Commission does not just reject them, but they do make telephone calls to all the ones that fall through the cracks. That's not something we should take for granted, because a lot of folks who are trying to suppress the vote are glad that that hasn't happened, or they're fudging. But they do make a honest attempt in Douglas County to call the residents. In some cases, the ballot or the application is not signed, things like that. And then there's also the issue of the felons.
Well, that's a different issue. The problem with they're not actually rejected until 10 days after there's been a problem found. So yeah, the problem could be an envelope that's not signed, and early, signature doesn't appear to match. But Preston's right that the various counties they handle it in different ways, and so that seems not quite fair.
So,
and this is why we need in this. I think we need a law. We need this in statute that says there is a cure process.
uniformity.
Yes, that's very critical, and it should be at the state level too. That's what some other states are doing. This, and I think this really brings
Because
the point that once election day is over, the fight for fair and, access to voting does not end. So these are issues that, we can be advocating for and voting and pushing to bring up in legislation and to get like a law like that passed. And it's just like, the other thing is that one of those things that's true to my heart, and I think part of this was what you're saying, is that the names who were told they weren't allowed to vote, maybe some of them were because the registration was not right, but they had maybe been purged. And I really think we need to start looking very closely at who's purging them, who's being purged, why they're being purged, and get some uniformity and some sunshine on what happens with voter purges, because that's one of the most insidious forms of voter suppression that people don't think about. And it's very rampant in many states. And it's a very quiet way to just chip away at voters here and there. And if there's not like a huge purge, like the 143,000, whatever it was in Wisconsin, where it makes the national headlines, if it's just a few thousand here or a few hundred there, people don't notice, but those votes count. We all know that races are lost or won many times by those few voters. So I think voter purging is one of those things that you could look at too. So, and that's just kind of one of my pet peeves. So I must admit. So
on the original question from Janice, I did post a letter that the ACLU published about that issue, Janice. So just for your reference.
I saw that. Thank you, Crystal.
Yeah, so I'm just going to take a couple of seconds and talk about, what my vision and direction and commitment is to you and hopes for the league. And basically it comes down to, I have a profound commitment to ending voter suppression. I want to build a strenuous program promoting and embracing and making DEI part of our DNA. A clear plan to building an intergenerational enterprise, and a definite strategy for strengthening internal communications and promoting leadership development. And, the way we can do that, obviously we're going to do fair maps and looking at voter purges, but some very specific things that are happening that I just want to let you all know, that the DEI committee is working on what we're calling a code of conduct. Because, we have put DEI in equal to our nonpartisan policy, but we don't have enough structure around it, and it's not like we want, if you say this or do that, it's wrong or right, but we need some governance around how we are going to conduct ourselves in this era of true diversity, equity, and inclusion. And so the DNI city is going to be working on that. And that might be something you want to think about at the local levels too, or at the state levels. What's that mean? What is your code of conduct, and how will you hold each other accountable in a DEI look? Okay. We're going to be working on an affiliation agreement. We're one of the biggest organizations in the country that has no real necessarily clear agreement between all of its different parts. So we're going to be working on an affiliation agreement that's going to go between local and state and national, all three together. And this is going to be an agreement that's not going to be top down. We're going to be reaching out to many members across the country to help us figure out what this should look like. I'm excited about 2 task force that we're going to be asking members from around the country. And I keep saying this, guys, because keep your ears open, because I may be tapping on your door, or we're expecting some of you to volunteer up, okay? But we have a task force on league structure. We've struggled with the league structure for a long time, and just even things like around, per person payment. I'm sorry, BP. My nose is getting stuffy here. And how we are going to deal with that, and what it looks like to have leagues that aren't necessarily the typical looking league organization, and how does that fit? And then we're going to do a task force on leadership development. Everybody's been saying we need more emphasis on leadership development, but what does that mean? What is it that you want? You know, and so that will be getting people from across the country. We're going to review our impact on issues to make sure that it's following our DEI policy. And internal communications is really dear to my heart. And I think that we need to figure out a way how leagues can, you know, communicate league to league, you know, not just, you know, local to state to national, but, you know, the league in somewhere Utah may want to communicate with, you know, the Greater Omaha League. Maybe they're doing something really unique, or they see something you guys are doing and they want to engage. And so we need to make that easier to do, and we need to really, you know, push it ahead as something that's going to make us a stronger organization, because everybody's doing such cool things out here, and you don't get a chance to know. So we're going to do better at that. And then, of course, my final thing is developing an emerging leaders work group. I really feel strongly that it's time for us to figure out a way to engage across generations and in a positive way. For a while we had that going, and then it kind of fizzled, and you know, and each league does its own thing. But I think it's time for a national to really step up to the game and do some things along that line. So that's kind of where I'm at, and I'm saying these things because, quite frankly, I just want to remind you that, you know, national is not some entity that sits there doing its own thing, just like the state league isn't, just like a local league isn't, and that we really do need each other. And that, so I am saying that you can help by doing several things. You can, you know, sign up for the league update and read it when it comes out. You know, use the league management site for so much information. Attend webinars. We have webinars up the yin yang that are great to engage in, and develop your own framework around DEI. And I know you guys are doing that. You're doing some great work, and just keep on keeping on, as my mom would say. And introduce and use your DEI lens on everything you do, and take the initiative to communicate with other leagues. And if you have a list of concerns or questions, reach out to another league or Zoom together. Or if you have a list of concerns and questions for me, reach out to me, because I can't be in this role as, excuse me, this role as president of the league without your help. You know, I feel the league's an amazing organization. It energizes me every day, and I do mean that sincerely. And it's a powerhouse for doing good work. And but it's only strong as its members. And like I like to say, is that, you know, the real people doing the real work are the league members who are out here in your local and your state leagues. You are truly the boots on the ground. And I need you to help me make this league better. So I just want you to know that. So
Thank you so much. That was so inspirational. I know a lot of our members and exec needed to hear that, as you know, the season has become a little bit intense and things are ramping up. So all the efforts are well appreciated. We will now move into our Q&A. If you have a question and you'd like to either type it into the chat box below or unmute yourself so that you can pose it yourself, please feel free to do so now.
Hey, Deb, this is Mary Lee Moulton. I just wanted to tell you, I was on the nationwide texting call the other day where they put us into groups, and it was fabulous because while we texted, people from, like, I was talking to people from New Jersey and people from California, and we were exchanging ideas, and that was really, really helpful. So I think the more things that you can do that are like that, I think that really fosters engagement with leagues across the country, with league members. I thought that was great.
okay, fantastic. I will carry that message. And, you know, because we're looking at ways to do things, and that kind of feedback helps us, because it's kind of hard sometimes to tell, was it really well accepted? How did people like it? How did it work? So that's great. I will send that message back, and we will work on more things like that. So those are the kind of ideas and feedback that really are going to push us and make us better. So I love it when you guys tell me this kind of stuff. I mean, you can tell me the bad stuff too, okay? But, you know, it's really inspiring to know that you're really thinking about how the league can move forward and what makes it work. So that's cool. So.
Absolutely. Does anyone else have a question they'd like to bring forward?
I would just like to add one more thing, you know, it's very bad when you get me talking, okay? But we do have an incredible strategic framework that was, as you may remember, 2 years ago, we rolled out the transformation roadmap, which was maybe a bit confusing and maybe everybody didn't quite get on board with. Well, we developed a strategic framework from which the National League is working now with 6 very clear bullets with our, you know, with the goal toward really pushing some things in the next 10 years. Basically, it's kind of like a 10-year, well, it's a 4-year framework, but it has in the back of it kind of a 10-year feel. And I would encourage you to take a look at that framework, and I will make sure that, I think probably Linda, you have a copy of it, and Candy, do you
Yes,
have a
I was
copy?
proud to be on that, to be helping with that. Yeah.
I believe
Okay.
so.
So I
Mhm.
think that's something that you can use as you're building your own strategic plans or whatever you may call them nowadays. I know we have new words for strategic planning, but that using that kind of as a framework can help you kind of understand where the league is going. So I just forgot. I wanted to throw that out there. So.
All right. Well, let's see. Any last questions, guys?
I wish I had actually, I wish I could do shorthand for one thing, but was this taped or is this being
Yes.
taped? Because especially what you were saying toward the end there, Deborah, about DEI being part of our DNA, and there was just so much more. I'll just have to go back and watch it again, because we actually, on the state level, we are finally getting our DEI efforts moving, and we actually have a date. I'll just go ahead and tell everybody that right now. It's December 5th, if that's a Saturday. It's actually going to be a 2-part session that we're doing. We actually sort of got it planned out this morning at 10 o'clock this morning. Got 2 professors, one who is one of our state board members at Creighton University, who are going to be mostly leading it, but with also partnering with the ADL. So it's going to be great, and it'll be open to all of our state board members. But I really think if you feel like you would like to be involved too, I think we could probably make that work. Anybody else who is on here. So let me know if you want to, or we can we can see how it goes. But I think it's going to be really valuable. So I'm excited that we're moving along here at last.
Yay, that's great. That's exciting to hear. And just remember that every month we have a DEI webinar that is sponsored by the DEI committee at the national, and it's open to anybody who wants to join. I want to say, is it the third Thursday night of every month? And the topics are awesome. And that's another thing where we have league members from all across the country. And so they're engaging and they're chatting, and we have, you know, league members and sometimes guest speakers. And so that's a neat way. And one thing great about that too is it kind of tweaks your ideas about topics that you can talk about in your own DEI programs too. So,
Oh,
but
and
that's
we had
really
a question. What is it? Diversity, equity, and inclusion.
mm-hmm.
So
And that will, if you get your league, you know, sign up for your league update, all those webinars and the dates of them will be there, but also every single webinar that we do is recorded. So all the DEI webinars are recorded, all the tech webinars are recorded. So we record them all so that if you can't be on the webinar at the time, you can find it and review it. So.
Awesome. Alrighty, guys. Well, I want to thank you all so much for joining us, but most greatly, I want to thank Dr. Deborah Ann Turner for joining us as our LWV National President. We are so proud to have such a great model within our own local organization to lead the nation and lead us also in turn. I want to thank all of you for joining us again for a great Dine and Discuss. And if you have any questions for President Turner, Dr. Turner, please send them our way so that we can relay them and make sure that your concerns or questions are answered. If you have any questions for us on exec, please feel free to send us a message, and we wish you guys a great rest of your night. Thank you so much, guys.
And thank you for having
Thank
me.
you.
You once again introduced me. A league is my endorphin. So thank you.
Yes.
That's a great line. Right.
Alrighty, good night, everyone.
Good night.